Welcome to the Rabbi and The Shrink. I'm Dr. Margarita Gurri, Dr. Red Shoe, and this is my favorite rabbi, Rabbi Yonason.
Yonason Goldson.
I love having the rabbi here, and we have the privilege today of interviewing one of the most amazing global experts on customer service, Marilyn Scuttle, CV.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. How exciting, the Rabbi and the Shrink. Oh my gosh, I have to be here.
Well, how could we do it without you? So one of the things that you're especially good at is the issue of customer service and well-being. So why don't you address that? And then we have questions about ethics.
Good. Well, well-being is the hot topic of the day, because if you're going to thrive in a business, you need to keep your employees able to work. And right now, with so much uncertainty in the world, we've got the highest rate of anxiety and stress. And then anxious and stressful people working with customers doesn't work real well, does it? And the customers are anxious and stressed because whenever the unknown is what you're stepping into, that can be scarier than anything else because our minds are designed to protect ourselves, right? And the unknown is uncertainty. So more than ever, we need to focus on the well-being of our employees and also making our customers feel safe and get that I belong here feeling.
So what does customer service have to do with ethics?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that because this is so juicy. People don't realize, especially new employees, young people coming into the field, how important trust is when you want a customer for life. Trust is, if it's broken, it could last 40 years before they're coming back. But when you establish trust, and this is where ethics comes in, you do what you say you're going to do. And if things go wrong, you fix it, you address it, you do those steps you need to do to set things right.
And it really is kind of common sense. Who are the people that we trust, or the people that we're not worried about? We're not questioning their moral compass. We're not questioning their motives. One of the catchphrases today is transparency.
Mm-hmm.
When we see the behind the scenes, we understand why decisions are being made the way they are. And we see that there's a process for getting things done. All of this creates trust, builds relationships, and earns us the kind of loyalty that we want to have, particularly in our business relationships.
And the thing that people don't realize around that is if trust goes up, the difficulty also goes up because people's expectations go up. And the higher the expectation, the more challenge it is to serve them well. And so, I've worked in companies where they say, we got a thriving business, but their expectations are so high. Well, that means you're doing a really good job of building trust. And I think that's like a little, what would you call that little switch in your mind? Like you call your book is Grappling with the Gray,
Yes.
Rabbi. It's grappling with the gray around, okay, how do I look at this? It was easier when they didn't trust us and I had no customers to deal with, but then you have no job.
And it's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? That the better you get, the higher your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's more demanding.
Exactly. Go ahead.
But no, and that's really how it should be. We were talking before we started that, I said, I hope I'm smarter in 5 years than I am now. And then the doctor said, I hope I'm smarter tomorrow than I am today. And we really should be raising the bar for ourselves on a daily, weekly, yearly basis.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where the well-being piece comes into how we run our business. And as Margarita is the queen of dealing with difficult people, it's having the skill set to keep yourself calm when you're dealing with difficulties, when somebody's yelling or crying or complaining, that you can be soothing yourself and seeing yourself not as being attacked, but as hearing the information you need to help set things right.
I think that these days are more and more misunderstandings because people are doing things differently.
Mhm.
And when we're doing things new, we don't always know the implications of our choices, whether we're the employee or the customer or the business owner. And I think it leaves for more room for misunderstandings, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And how you handle, if you can be calm in the storm, and if you're just feeling like, oh my gosh, they're being so rude. And really, they're just asking you a lot of questions, and you're misunderstanding lots of questions as meaning they don't trust you. When in reality, certain personality types, the analytical people, they will ask you all the questions because they want to dot their I's and cross their T's. So it's not about them not trusting you. It's about them soothing themselves to make the decision to work with you. Those are the kind of misunderstandings where personality styles clash. And we need to look at that and say, okay, people don't have to have the same way of expressing themselves, right? It's like when you have a values clash, it's like a beliefs on steroids. You're like so triggered, like, I would never say that to somebody. Well, they would. Is that okay? Something to think about.
I'd like to dig into that for a minute because, we just had an episode when our pre-interview meeting where we weren't understanding each other, and I got a little bit cantankerous,
Cranky.
that works. I was a crankcase, and I know exactly where this comes from. My father was an extremely intelligent man.
Mm-hmm.
And he got very quickly impatient when people didn't understand what he was saying the first time. And, we learned from our parents for better and worse.
Yep.
And, I passed on, I hope, my good and unfortunately, my less good traits to my kids in many ways.
That's our job.
Yeah. But, it's something I'm aware of in principle, conceptually, but I'm not always aware of it in the moment.
Mm.
And in this case, the doctor could call me out on it. And because we have a trusting relationship, I could accept that, yeah, I got a little, I overreacted. But I still find myself slipping into that kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the anxiety of our times. We're pulled in so many directions. We have so many pressures on us, and we don't always feel equipped to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
So we become defensive, we become insecure. We're sort of out of a baseline where everything needs to be flowing smoothly, and the minute it's not, we get flustered and agitated.
Right.
Do you have some techniques or some advice for how we can help each other and help ourselves deal with this type of interaction?
Yes. So I love this quote by Wyatt Webb. We're always 100% responsible for 50% of every relationship we're in.
I like it.
Yeah. So we can't have control over what the other person's going to say or do, but we always have control over the thoughts we think, the actions and behaviors that we have, and the images we hold in our minds. So you're like laying in bed, just imagining this horrible conversation we're going to have the next day when it may never happen. And so really looking at, if I'm going to take 100% responsibility for my half of the relationship, what do I have to own? What do I have to measure? What do I have to say? And, those are those pieces and parts that create clarity and also break away from the assumptions we have to really check it out. So one of the questions there's always the facts of the story, the facts of whatever the situation is. And then from the facts, we determine the story. We make assumptions about the facts, and that creates a feeling, and then the feeling creates an action. I'll give you an example. So Bob and Mike are up for the same promotion. Bob gets the promotion. Now, Bob and Mike are in the same task force, and Mike comes in late for 3 meetings in a row. Those are the facts. No emotion in it, no story in it. Those are the facts. Now, what do you suppose Bob is saying to himself? What's the story Bob makes up about Mike being late? What story do you think he might make up?
He's miffed that he didn't get the promotion, and now he is taking revenge.
Exactly. He's undermining me. He's doing this on purpose. And with that, it creates a feeling. And so the feeling there would be anger, resentment, all of those things. Now, you know what? Resentment, the definition of resentment is having an expectation about the other person that they don't meet. It's really all, that's where resentment comes from. And then you don't communicate it. So you're sitting there and that whole quote, resenting somebody's like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It's like, it only is hurting you. So clarity, you want to address it. So he wasn't addressing it. So with that feeling, his action was, when asked, what are you going to do about it? I'm going to call him out in the next meeting in front of everyone. That's what he was going to do. That was the action because he was mad. So that's the unconscious action that you take based on the story and the feelings. So instead, my recommendation is step back, look at the big picture, ask yourself, what is it you really desire here? And so Bob, his real desire was to have a good working relationship with Mike. Would calling him out in front of all of his peers do that? No. So so that's that moment of the 100% responsibility. So you look at it. So what I feel like doing will not get me the results I want. So what might? And so he decided to have a conversation with Mike. And he took him aside. He said, hey, Mike, I've noticed that you've been late 3 meetings in a row. And I'm telling myself that there's some resentment going on your part that you're it feels like it's a little undermining, but I want to check it out from your point of view, because this is just a story I'm telling myself. And so Mike, he says, oh, well, my wife's been sick. I've been driving the kids to daycare before work. And so I'm always going to be about 5 minutes late. And it's like, oh, that completely busted open what he was thinking. But then you ask yourself, who's responsible for the breakdown? They both are. Because Mike was accepting the meeting invite, knowing he was going to be 5 minutes late. And Bob let 3 weeks go by without saying anything, without checking it out. So they both, yeah, exactly. And we do this all the time. And our customers, they have perceptions about things. And their perception is more important than the truth in their world. So you might have done just the best you possibly could have done, and no other company would have done such great work for them, and they're still not happy. And so this is the breakdown of clarification and communication, and this is Margarita's expertise in communicating with different styles of people. It's really important.
It's still hard to do, though, no matter how much any of us are experts. It's true. Hard to think, how am I going to have this difficult conversation, especially when we tell these juicy stories in our head about what the person's action means, right?
Exactly. Our stories rule our feelings, and our feelings determine our actions. We think, no, I'm a logical person. But the truth is we make emotional decisions and then we justify them logically because we're human beings and our brains are set up to, this is an amazing thing. So when we're triggered, we, often get that threat response, which is fight or flight, right? So when you hit fight or flight, what happens is the digestion, your blood flow to your digestion slows down, to your reasoning slows down, and everything goes towards survival. So your muscles can run, or you can fight, everything else is out the window. However, you can also have a challenge response to stress. When you have a challenge response to stress, what happens is you don't get hijacked by that whole fight or flight thing. You move into focus and flow. And this is why people can really thrive in stress if they see it as a resource. So you have a deadline and you're thinking, ooh, okay, this stress I'm feeling is a resource to help me focus. This is important. Now we go into a challenge response, and challenges create champions in customer service, in business, and in life.
I heard a study done that some time ago that they gave groups of people a task to do, and they gave different groups different amount of time in which to do it. Some got 2 hours, some got 4 hours, some got 8 hours. And what they found is that very little got done until the halfway point.
Right.
They concluded people need that sense of urgency driving them
Mm-hmm.
before they really get focused and get down to work.
And so what you're saying to me is a good thing to think for ourselves is it's urgent for us to have strong, positive relationships. So having that urgency of, oh, somebody's upset, I'm not going to say anything. Let's pause and think about that. What's the big picture? What do I desire from this relationship? And then you start to say, okay, doing the hard thing, having the difficult conversation is the kindest thing I can do, and building up that connection.
Yeah, and that's a really great way of reframing, because there's so much uncertainty. What if the person takes it the wrong way? What if I don't express it? What if there are things going on that I don't know about? I have to be willing to communicate, which has an element of risk. And when others communicate with me, I have to be willing to try and accept it in the best possible spirit.
Yes.
So that I don't discourage them from coming back the next time with something.
That is so true. And I love this example of, there's two ways of looking at something. It's like, suppose your spouse forgets your birthday. And then one way of thinking is, he forgot my birthday, he must not love me. The other way of thinking is, somebody who loved me forgot my birthday. I wonder what's going on. And you're going to have two very different conversations based on that thinking. So challenging your beliefs, challenging your thoughts in the moment. Don't just believe everything you think. Pause. And especially when it's a partnership or a team, let's err on the side of assuming that this person has good intentions, and let's clarify. Clarity is king and queen and everything else. The clarity really helps to get things set in the right path.
It's very hard to do that, though, because you have to be willing to trust yourself that even if you're hearing something that you would die opposing,
yes,
you have to ask yourself, especially if you want a relationship with this person, or if you're stuck, like in a working relationship, what do I want to have happen with this discussion? Because sometimes feelings don't matter. What is the end point? And if we can delineate it. Now, you teach something that I find very helpful. Could you teach the rabbi and anyone who's going to be hearing this tape about your hand? It's not just for Michigan. All right.
Where we live, we always point to our
I know, we're right here.
Yeah. So especially for those of you who own a business or you're working in customer service, you wonder from the customer's perspective, because we're talking a lot today about perspectives. What do we need to do to keep customers coming back, to get that customer loyalty and trust? It's all in the palm of your hand. These are the main touch points that keep things going. So the first one is your first finger, and that's first impressions. And we think in terms of first impressions when you meet somebody, you make eye contact, smile. But these days, it's going to your website. Can I find their phone number? Oh, you're searching. There's no way to find an email address. And those things that irk you. We want to get rid of the irritation lists with the first contact. So first impressions are important. The last finger is your last impressions, which people underestimate because last impressions leave a lasting impression. There's even research around doctors who sit down the final minute of visiting with a patient are less likely to get sued because there's a sense of connection, they care. So that last impression. And have you ever bought something expensive and they're fawning all over you till the sale is done and then crickets, they're gone, right? So it's that follow-up after the fact and the last impression. Then you've got this middle finger, which we don't want them pointing at us. The problem is these are the high emotion moments, right? That's why taller than the rest. It's the high emotion. How you handle high emotions is the most critical touch point because when they're upset or emotionally charged, you've got somebody passionate. You want somebody passionate in your business because they might be passionately angry right now, but if you set it right, they're going to be passionately for your company and a beacon of sales. So managing those your emotions so you can be there during those high impact moments. We could write a whole book and talk about all the different ways. We've talked about some, but really listening and caring. And, there's a saying, customers don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. It's really true. That caring piece is really big here. And then that leaves this finger here, which is the ring finger, which we want to marry our customers to our businesses, right? But this is the subtle touches. These are the subtle touches, the small little things you do, the little thank you note you send, remembering somebody's birthday, being there for somebody when they have a loss, especially internal customers with your team. Anybody inside the company that affects your work is your internal customer. Are you showing them consideration? Are you saying little appreciations to them? Are you doing the little things that you don't have to do that make an impression? Those are those subtle moments that are so powerful. And that leaves the thumb. And we all hear the whole gauge, like, are you giving them a positive, negative, or neutral experience? But really what this is your measuring gauge on feedback, because what you measure is managed. And we want to make sure that we're measuring the customer experience. We're measuring the results of every point of contact. So this is our gauge. And if you measure the right things and take action on them, you're going to get better results. So that's my, in a moment, right there in the palm of your hand, the essentials of keeping that customer connection strong.
I love that hand. So give us an example of some of the things that can be measured. So let's say I've done all the other four fingers right.
Mm-hmm.
So then what am I measuring?
Okay, so here's where a lot of people go wrong. Have you ever had this happen? You're very happy with the service, then they send you a little survey, and you think, oh, I was so happy, I'll fill out the survey. And the survey goes on and on and on. And all of a sudden you hate that company. It's happened to me. Has this happened to you? Yeah. So that's an example of don't measure just to measure. Don't waste their time. If you value your customers' time, they will give you all kinds of information, but keep it short and only ask measurement questions that you're willing to do something about. Don't just say, oh, that's a good question. Let's ask this question. Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, what are you going to do with that result? What are you going to do when you know that? When I was writing my Who's Your Gladys book with my co-author, Lori Jo Vest, we interviewed for 1.5 years companies all over. Yep. Oh, there's the book. Yep. And
I love your book.
Thank you so much. One of them was Clear Vision Optical, and they measure customer satisfaction with a little survey. If they get a low, like a real low measurement, the CEO calls them. Now, this is business to business, but he literally calls them. I'm sorry you had a bad experience. Please tell me more. Tell me about it. What a beautiful thing to do. Do you feel like this company cares? Yeah. And did that take a lot of time that you'd think a CEO doesn't have time for this? Well, maybe you don't have time not to do something like this, because if you don't care, they are gone. So that would be an example of measuring the right things in the right timing so that you can do something with it. And I could give you one more example if you like.
Yes, please.
Please.
So you know how we have Yelp and Google and we're doing customer reviews all the time? And sometimes they will give you a negative review. I work with a spa, and the spa would get, they have this big 7-page list of all the things they do to make sure you have a good customer experience. So when they get a negative review come in on Yelp, you can reach out anonymously. Like, you don't know who they are, but you can reach out to them. And so what this woman, Peggy, she does is she's a CEO. She sends a message and says, I'm so sorry this happened. I wish I had known this right away. Please let us make it up to you. I'm going to give you a free service. And then she gives a service they haven't done before. Like if all they've done is a manicure, she'll give them a facial or something like that. And I'm going to send you a 7-page evaluation. Please, will you rate us on all 7 pages and get this beautiful free service? Now, a person who gives a negative review is somebody who likes to give their opinion, right? And so they come in and all of a sudden they're seeing all these 7 pages worth of little things they hadn't noticed. These things here, the subtle differences that make the experience great. And almost 10 times out of 10, after doing that, they go back and change their review and give a glowing review. So that is, it's what do you do after something falls apart is what makes all the difference.
There's so much to unpack in this, but this last point you made is really compelling, because as human beings, we tend to focus in on what's wrong.
Yeah.
There's this exercise where they show people a blank sheet of paper with one dot on it. They say, "What do you see?" "Well, there's a black dot." "What about the whole sheet of paper that's white?" You pick the one dark thing to focus in, and that's just our nature.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're describing here is a means of redirecting the client's attention to notice the good, so that they will on their own reframe their evaluation, their impression. Exactly. The other thing that I really think is an important takeaway is we're talking about the business versus the customer, but I think your 5 rules also apply between bosses and employees.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My wife teaches Chinese to Chinese children in China via Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, they had to change the scheduling around. And they wrote an apologetic note, and they said, because of the inconvenience, we want to give you a gift. And they sent a stuffed zebra, which is their logo.
Oh.
Now, my wife is an adult woman. All the kids are out of the house. She was over the moon with this thing because she can actually use it in her teaching. But mostly it was that sense of, we did something that is inconvenienced you. We want to show you that we appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
So here's something that we don't give to everybody,
mm-hmm.
that we want you to have. And it really doesn't take a lot to show appreciation, to show consideration, to compensate for minor inconveniences if we just have a little bit of initiative and creativity.
Exactly. And over at Sky Lakes Hospital, I interviewed them, and they give every employee a discretionary amount of money that they could spend on the spot, no question asked, for those kind of situations. So if they see that a person has had to wait and the appointment got canceled because the doctor is still in surgery or something, they can give them a gift card to the cafeteria for a free meal. Or they see a child crying, they could go buy a teddy bear and give it to the child for no reason, for that reason, at their discretion. And those are so meaningful. And then you have the flip side where it backfires. So I had a horrible experience at a hair salon, and I usually don't complain. I'm like Gladys. Gladys doesn't complain. Most of your customers won't complain. They'll just go to a competitor and never tell you again. And we want the complainers because we have a shot at making things improve. Well, I wasn't going to complain, but I was so upset I did. And they sent me 15% off my next service. I was like, I'm not coming back. It's like, that's an inappropriate thing. Like, I love what they did for your wife. That was a highly appropriate and connecting thing. So, yeah.
I've got a new Marilyn Scuttle quote that I love. So Marilyn, as you can tell, Rabbi, is very quotable. And I'm quoting her all the time. So I say, talk to the hand. And I mean, Marilyn, her business is named Subtle Shifts from her last name, Marilyn Scuttle, which I think is brilliant. So I love that whole idea of, can you create a challenge response to stress? And don't get hijacked by the F's. In FEMA and CDC, they talk about the 5 F's. Fight, flight, freeze, was fright, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's 5 of them. And then, so don't get hijacked by the F's, go for focus and flow. And I think that the example, Rabbi, with your wife and her employer, and Marilyn, what you're talking about, I think that goes with my new favorite quote of yours.
Oh, thank you. And now, Margarita, what you do with, I've never seen anyone do it the way you do it with the different characters you use when you talk about difficult people. But that is such an essential thing that every organization needs to take into effect, because we do have different personalities and we don't always know what to do with them. And then we make assumptions that are incorrect and respond in a less than compatible way. So we really need to look at so many different aspects and challenge our thinking to create that connection.
It's so true, but it's so hard to sometimes be in charge of our own selves because we're all difficult in our own special way. And the issue is that I don't even have to know if I'm the one being difficult or someone else is, right? I just have to decide what needs to happen. And when I'm not sure, I could always call one of you guys. My friend Sue is on the call. I could call her. I could call my twin sister. So one of the questions is, who do you call that helps you be reasonable rather than say, oh, that person's, the certain people that build the fire, right?
Yeah.
Add to the flames. That's not good. So who are we going to call? Well, Marilyn is one of those. Marilyn, if people want to reach you, what is your favorite way to be reached so you can be of service to them?
Well, the quickest way is to go to my website, Marilyn at MarilynScuttle.com. Oh, no, that's my email.
I'm writing it down.
You can find my books on Amazon, or you could reach me on my website, or I give you my email address, Marilyn at MarilynScuttle.com. Feel free to reach out.
I'm putting your book page for Amazon down again, and I'll put your email too then.
Thank you so much. And how fun. I loved your insights, both of you, and having the Rabbi and the Shrink here is so amazing because I'm getting this wealth of deep wisdom coming through with all the little things I've been sharing. And then you're like, bam, bam. That's so good.
That's one of the critical elements of ethics is having different perspectives.
Yes.
And if you have two people who see things the same way and think the same way and are on the same page about everything, then it's kind of redundant.
Exactly.
And what's the point of having two people there if there's nothing new? But it's the differences between us. And this is true in any kind of a business environment too. You want partners who are good at different things. You want team members who have different roles and different strengths. And when they all work together in pursuit of a common purpose, that's when you have tremendous success. And that's when you have those kinds of really trusting and intimate relationships that drive success.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've come to the point where, Rabbi, what is the word of the day, sir?
Pithy. And I'm trying to be pithy in my presentation
Duly
of that
noted.
word.
It's in the chat.
It's worth thinking about. We live in an age of sound bites, and that's not always a good thing, because in many ways, when you try to condense every idea into a few syllables, you don't allow for deeper thought. You don't allow for context. But if we want to communicate effectively, we need to be able to take complex ideas and present them as concisely as possible. Because, as Marilyn said, we're all overwhelmed, we're all stressed for time, and people go rambling on and on and on. We can stop listening at some point, and then there is no communication going on. So keep it pithy.
You have any words of wisdom on how to do that? I mean, you have faced some of the most challenging situations for your clients, and you have clients all around the world. And as a global customer service, award-winning customer service expert, what do you send us home with as a key takeaway? What can we do?
Well, here, I'll play off of the word pithy.
Okay.
And I'll shift it to soundbite. So if you can express yourself in a memorable way so that your goal for the business you have, that care for your customer, is quick and easy to remember, your team will embrace it and run with it. Like happiness is the key for not Zerbos. What is that company? Zappos. And they actually created a phone line that people could just call when they want to talk because they're stressed out for no other reason. So creating happiness is their thing. So what is the theme that you want to run through your company? What's the thread you want? Express it, show it in every newsletter, treat your internal team with it, and they will treat your customers with it.
That's one of the things I have found you're very good at. And the rabbi too, actually, helping people figure out what is their theme, whether it's for one meeting or for their business, is very hard to be pithy, as I've demonstrated.
You are fine.
Simon Sinek made this popular with Find Your Why, but that idea goes way back. Because ultimately, what is happiness? Happiness is feeling that I'm connected to something greater than myself. Happiness is a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, a sense of mission. My life matters, and what I'm doing matters, and I'm being successful in a pursuit that matters, and it's going to live on after me. And I think the way to win customers is to not just provide a service and not just provide value, but to give them an opportunity to feel that they're part of something big and something important and something meaningful.
So, Marilyn, if someone is having a trouble, how do we use this hand of yours to help them focus so that we can have a more meaningful conversation? Or how do we use it? What do you suggest?
So I would get very specific with the situation and the customer. And maybe you run through it. You could create, I did this with Blue Cross Blue Shield. We created, like I have Gladys. Well, they had 5 names of 5 different characters of their typical customer. And let's run each one of these through these pieces. An elderly person who has to now text, it's hard with their little fingers and their eyes and having to see. That's not customer friendly. So maybe rather than using text for them, you do phone calls. There's that saying, treat people the way you want to be treated. No, treat people the way they want to be treated, because we all have different preferences. We all have different physical limitations or situations in our life. So you want to take very specific situations and run it through. And what would be a last impression for a senior might be very different than a last impression for a teenager. So think about your target market and the different people in it, and then run through specifics and see what's happening at each of these points. It's a great activity to do as a team, because then you get everybody owning the process of what you're doing. When everyone owns a piece of how you treat customers, they do it well.
And so one situation I've seen that you also handle very well is when people get into either denial or blaming others, not themselves.
Yes.
What would you suggest that anyone who is lucky enough to be hearing you, what do they do about that?
So the 3 things you have to give up if you want to be successful in life is blaming, complaining, and making excuses for why things are the way they are. And typically what we do when we don't like the results in our life, we blame the event over there. Our mother caused this, or that bad customer service person caused this, or that mean customer caused this. So we blame back over here what happened. You don't have power over what has already happened. Your power is in how you respond now. You have all kinds of power to affect the outcomes in your life right in how you choose to respond. So rather than complain about what was, look at what can I do? What response can I have to the situation to get a better outcome? That's where your power is.
I put it in the chat for everyone.
I can't remember where I heard this. Not my observation, but I think it's very instructive. There's a world of difference between responding to treatment and reacting to treatment.
Yes.
Yeah. And when we react, it's generally visceral. It's in the moment. It's without a lot of conscious thought. When we respond, it's when we take the time to actually contemplate how we are responding. And that can make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. But that takes a pause, right? It takes a pause. And a lot of us are very uncomfortable by silence. And so one thing you could do, you're on the phone and they're asking this and you're ready to blow up. Let me get back to you. I'll call you back in a half hour. Give yourself the pause, or even a few moments of silence in a meeting to gather your thoughts and consider strategically, how do I choose to respond here? Because our automatic reactions usually very, animalistic, right? It would go back to our roots as back in the prehistoric times, and we go into fight or flight. We don't want to do that. You want to pause, breathe. And this is kind of an interesting thing. You always hear people say when you need to calm down, breathe and count to 10. And it's like, oh gosh, is that overused? Blah. Don't tell me to do that. But then I talked to a doctor. I actually interviewed a lot of doctors. And one of them said, here's why you do it. When you breathe, you oxygenate your brain. And when you count, you reactivate the frontal cortex where reasoning and logic is. So you're actually rebooting the computer, so to speak, so that you can respond rather than react. So pause and choose your response instead of just unconsciously reacting.
I think that's lovely advice. And it's hard to do, isn't it?
It's one of the challenges that I have with, frankly, with what we're doing right now, is that, if I pause for 5 seconds, the audience is going to start checking the feed to make sure that the line hasn't disconnected. We've sort of created a society and a culture where we feel we can't pause. And therefore we end up in these kinds of situations sometimes where we spoke too fast, we spoke too hastily, we didn't take the time to frame our response properly because we were too uncomfortable with that silence.
And, it's interesting. My husband wrote an article that ended up on the cover of Toastmaster magazine around pausing. And he talks about there's a 1 second pause where you let people follow you. Because if you just talk monotone and continuous, people tune out. So there's the 1 second pause. Then there's the 2 second pause that has people think. So you pause and it gives them a chance to catch up with what you're saying. The 3 second pause allows them to make a conclusion. So if you're posing something, you're giving a big example, you're posing a situation, what do you think? Pause 3 seconds so that they have time to formulate that thought. And then you're actually compelling. I think fear is the reason why we continuously talk and we don't like silence. And it's not true in other cultures. They're much more comfortable with silence than we are. So if we can alleviate the fear by soothing ourselves, I actually talk about bringing up an inner coach that soothes you through it, because we have that inner critic, right? We want the inner coach that calms us down. We'll be more likely to be effective in our communication.
You remind me of a short story that there was a rabbi was giving a class, and one of the students put down a tape recorder to record the class. Tape recorder, I'm dating myself. And it was one of the newfangled tape recorders. It had a device that would have auto pause, so that it wouldn't record the pauses in the speech. Oh. And somehow the rabbi saw there was something different about this tape recorder. He said, "What's different about this?" And so the student explained to him, and he shook his head and he said, "The pauses are the absolutely most essential part of the class."
Mm-hmm.
And that line has stayed with me for exactly the reasons that you're describing.
Yes.
And I know this from 23 years in the high school classroom, that if I would say something and I just stop and let my students have a moment to digest, to reflect, to think, maybe I wanted to elicit questions, or maybe I just wanted to give them the opportunity to let that idea settle in, sink in. It's slowing down can really benefit us in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. And I do want to point out, Margarita, Dr. Redshoe, I love that you said several times in this conversation today, that can be hard. And I think that's so essential for anyone listening, because if you think that it's going to be easy and then you're finding it's hard, you might stop trying it. But you know what? It's hard for everyone. It's hard. But the more you do it, the more there's a saying that it takes stress to alleviate stress. So give yourself small stresses that are a little hard, and then you'll build up your ability to be in challenging conversations and do all of these things. So thank you, Margarita, for bringing that up so well, that it isn't easy, but it gets easier as you do it.
Well, the rabbi talks about building your ethical muscles, and this is building your pause muscles. Yes. We have in NSA, the National Speakers Association, as my friend Dave Bricker says, it's the NSA that speaks, not listens. He is the king of the pause. He teaches the pause. And my favorite pause story is I was many years ago helping two unions hash out a conflict they were having, and it had come to blows. So they call me in, and I'm young then, and I somehow thought I could be of service. And at one point, I was so flabbergasted by them that I just paused and I just looked straight forward. I was just collecting myself. They both thought that I was disappointed in them, and they apologized. And I learned in that moment that if I don't apologize for what I'm doing and just take a pause, the way that you were talking, Marilyn, about the stories people write, they wrote the story that I was disappointed in them. In truth, I was just trying to avoid giving them a verbal slap because they were all, mijito, no, they were behaving badly. And I'm thinking, what do I say that doesn't add more fuel to this big fire? And it's amazing. So just by not knowing what to say, I said the right thing, which was nothing. Who knew? So I think that's funny.
Someone pointed out that the same letters that form the word listen form the word silent. So
yeah,
good.
My kindergarten teacher used to say that all the time, and it wasn't in a nice way. I was just learning English back then. So what is this silence? I didn't know what it was. So it's funny. Well, Marilyn Scuttle, you're just such a treat. I could talk to you all day. Do you have a final thing to say before we say goodbye to everyone?
Oh, well, I want to do a shout out to the two of you because providing this service allows people to learn about ethics in all different kinds of fields. Every time you do one, you're bringing different experts in and you're creating a forum for people to grow. And so and this is, for me, one of the essentials in life is continuously growing, continuously improving. It's the core of customer service. It's the core of success in your own life and keeping relationships strong. Keep growing.
Well, Marilyn, with you around, I suspect I will. Rabbi, you too. I'm grateful for both of you. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week for the Rabbi and the Shrink. Marilyn Scuttle at MarylynScuttle.com. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Rabbi, do you want to say goodbye?
Yeah. And I would also like to thank you, Marilyn, for being with us. The last point you made about growing, and before that, your point was about it being hard. And there's a reason why they're called growing pains.
Yes.
If we're not experiencing them, it means we're being stagnant and we're not moving forward. And so thank you. And thank you, Doctor, for providing the context and the framework that helps us all grow.
Pleasure. You all take care. We'll see you next week.